Good morning, everybody. This is the Wednesday, January 8th, 2025 Jupyter Frontends and Accessibility call. Welcome to any newcomers here. Please feel free to either introduce yourself or discuss issues if you have them or add things to the agenda. We typically operate off of an agenda. There should be links in the chat to that. But participate, any newcomers, feel free to participate in whatever way you like. You can either sit back and type in the chat, or you can participate kind of in whatever way you want to. So welcome. We're glad to have you here. It looks like we have a few things on the agenda today. First up is Mike.
Happy New Year, everybody. So we are starting the year with release on 4.2 branch, which is mostly a backport. I will probably talk more about this in the unrecorded section as well, but I think you would be very happy if you wanted to upgrade HTTPX to a new version, but couldn't. So that version backports all the patches that we've been doing over the past month and includes that as a fix, but no new exciting features. And version 4.4 Alpha 2, and there is a lot of excitement. First, Jupyter collaboration now can work with a whole host of extensions which were previously broken because of the RTC prefix. And huge thanks to David, who pioneered this idea of content providers that allow us to switch how we get and interact with the content without switching the drive. And that came in together with a pull request to Jupyter collaboration that's also available in 4.0 Alpha 0. Now, I anticipate that there will be some extensions which will not yet work there, and Jupytext is one where there might be some friction because it provides custom renderers for the notebooks, and the RTC might not be working, but in general, all other extensions should work now with collaboration enabled. And the other big thing in that release is subshells. It's a new feature which followed the Jupyter enhancement proposal route. I don't think that there is an immediate use case just yet for most of the users. However, it ships with a flag, which you need to enable to actually explore this feature in a so-called subshell console. And I think that's best explained by looking at the pull request. I will link to the pull request because Ian added a video in that pull request. And maybe I will also add it to the notes. Maybe that's more proactive than me trying to demonstrate that here. If you're interested, just have a look at the video, but basically it will allow you to access the variables while the kernel is executing some computations. For example, it is training a model, and you should be able to interact with kind of a copy of that independently. Now, there is an issue that Ian opened based on my feedback on the pull request, and this issue is whether this subshell console boolean config flag should be removed. I believe yes, it should be, because otherwise this feature is not exposed to the end user and hard to test at all, because you need to start JupyterLab with this feature flag. But if there are any concerns about maturity or users getting exposed to a potentially feature with a rough edges, I'm basically welcoming kind of discussion, and then we can decide before the final 4.4 release whether to keep that flag or not. And linking this issue in the chat as well. But yeah, please do test the latest alpha release, and that would be amazing to see any feedback on the RTC modes without the RTC prefix. And my final point is about planning for switching to beta. And according to the release plan, the major features that or changes that we planned for 4.4 are already in, except for 2. And these 2 is, one is Service Manager, so basically allowing to split to switch parts of the Service Managers with plugins and making it customizable. I think Jeremy was working on that, but since he's not on the call, this pull request is still in draft. So I don't know if there has been some recent movement. It would be good to get an idea on whether we should be waiting for that before going beta, or if we will be able to announce it for wider testing. It's mostly to signify that please do test. Any other opinions or thoughts?
I mean, I think it would be great to get the feature, and I'm actually checking to see if I can find out what.
Oh, yeah, that would be nice if you could. But also, if someone was developing a super cool new feature which has to go into a point release and is just about to open a pull request, speak now. Because otherwise, I will be trying to get to know from Jeremy about whether he's planning to get that finished soon and pushing for the beta. Otherwise, maybe we should relax a little.
Andrew has his hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, this is really exciting, the 4.0, like Alpha 1 of the RTC. I wanted to quickly check, is it correct that as soon as non-alpha version would be released for Jupyter Collaboration, we don't need to update pins in JupyterLab? Like the latest version would be kind of pulled in automatically of the Jupyter Collaboration, or would we need to update pins anywhere and like release a new version of the JupyterLab that would pull in the updated Jupyter Collaboration?
This is a good question. So JupyterLab does not depend on Jupyter Collaboration. And technically, Jupyter Collaboration doesn't depend on JupyterLab, but it's a lie. It's a soft lie, which is in order for Jupyter Collaboration to work, you need JupyterLab extension system, but that could be implemented by something which is not a JupyterLab. So basically any of the federated extension ecosystem examples that we ship.
Is that tokenized right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So actually just linking an issue. So because this new version of Jupyter Collaboration will be breaking and not backwards compatible, so you will need JupyterLab 4.4 in order for this Jupyter Collaboration version to work. We should probably pin to require a newer version of JupyterLab. But then we will potentially install JupyterLab if there is someone using Jupyter Collaboration with a custom frontend which implements JupyterLab extension support, then we would pull JupyterLab as an extra dependency. And I think that's fair. If you do have such a system deployment, please let us know in this issue. Otherwise, I think we should lean towards adding this pin in Jupyter Collaboration so that if users install a new version of Jupyter Collaboration, the new version of JupyterLab will be pulled in as well.
I had a quick follow-up question. So why do we need a JupyterLab 4.4 release? Because in this setup that you helped me understand better. I was under impression that it would be enough just like install Jupyter Collaboration, the latest version, and then the latest version of JupyterLab, whatever it is. And
yes, that would be the case if we added the pin. There currently is no pin in the pipe project, the TAML. There is no dependencies defined in Jupyter Collaboration. The assumption is that if you are installing Jupyter Collaboration, you already have JupyterLab or Notebook installed.
Yeah,
And
it's going to break. It needs a package with a pin that we've tested. We can't. This is broken so many times that it's got to be tight. We got to be able to tell people install it, because there's already like 4 packages for JupyterLab extension, because there's like content providers and like 6 different things. There has to be one answer for if you install this, it will work. And we have to accept that that little package needs to get shipped every time there's a new. It can't be minor, because we can't. It can't be that way. We can't keep doing this if they break on minor releases every time. We have to find some way for something to work.
So just to clarify, the JupyterLab release, which is 4.4 minor, does not break the old Jupyter Collaboration. New major Jupyter Collaboration version will require JupyterLab 4.4.
That's fine today. It's going to break again in the future. We're not done. This feature isn't done. So something has to exist that helps users not get a broken thing by default, because that's what happens to me.
Yeah, so I think what you said about there being multiple packages actually helped me realize we can only add the pin on the version to Jupyter Collaboration, which is kind of like a Python meta package, which pulls in the remaining 3 or 4 packages. And that way, if there really is a use case for someone to install Jupyter Doc Provider, Jupyter Collaboration UI, Jupyter Server YDoc, not in JupyterLab, they can still do that. They'll just have to do that, like defining their own list of dependencies.
Darian has a hand up.
Yeah, so we used to want collaboration to ship with Core Lab. Then it turned out that it was destabilizing the experience. It required too much of a headache, too many flags, whatever, right? We moved it to a separate package, partly for those reasons. Maybe also, I don't know, there were other arguments that I don't remember. But is there an intention at some point when it's like a mature feature to bring it back in, make it part of core? Like, does this package go away?
Please don't.
Why?
It would need to run for a solid year without losing data on 0 computers. Can it ever lose data? It still loses data.
Yeah, I mean, it still loses data is a great argument for not bringing it into core, but it's not an argument for not doing it forever. Like, I'm not suggesting we compromise data safety here.
Well, okay, then let's get to a full major version through a cycle with however many breaking changes that the YJS stuff is going to bring to it again before declaring victory, and then consider merging it in. But like for someone that's just using it on their own computer, if it causes any instability for someone that's using it on their own computer by themselves, it cannot be. There's no place. There's no place for it.
Are we intending for it to be a feature that you have to enable? Or are people wanting it to be the default?
I think the idea is right now you de facto have to enable it by installing the package. The installation of the package is a choice to enable it. If we were to ship it, we'd probably go back to a flag-based model. But that still might not mean it might mean that there's no like UI that shows multiple users and chat and stuff like that, but actually the notebook itself is still opening up as a Word document, not opening up as like a text document, right? It still might underlying, the implementation might change as long as it's transparent in the user experience. That part, I don't know what the idea is.
So I think that there is a number of users who would not want to have this extra additions to the user interface, which are added by collaboration, like the icon of this is you are this user, or the collaborators panel in the sidebar. Now, the stack underlying Jupyter collaboration, so the basically Jupyter server YDoc, it is bringing something which is super useful because we can synchronize the state of the notebook by sending partial updates to the server, and then we can read that for better completions on the server side without sending 100 megabytes of data from the front end. And we can save the notebook instantly because again, we don't need to transfer all of that. Or we can have the server-side execution. That's another big feature.
We can get rid of auto workspace redirection because multiple clients writing to CRDT is fine. That whole thing that sucks, that annoys everyone, that can go away if you're not using, if you're not worried about last write problems anymore.
So I think that there would be a big value added to the end user if we could stabilize that, but it suffers from all the same problems that Jupyter collaboration suffers, that there are still edge cases where there might be data loss. Now, I don't know if there are still edge cases like that, or if that was solved, but the issue with sporadic data loss is that it's sporadic and you cannot like decisively say that it's solved until you do not hear, like, yeah, it's basically, you do not know what you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, all I have is the legally binding non-answer of I'm not aware of any, but like, what do I know?
All right, I think we should probably move on for time here. We can revisit. We've got another agenda item from Susmit. Susmit, you can either hop on and talk about that, or if anybody wants to volunteer to read, maybe we could do that too.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone.
Okay.
So I posted in the chat just now. So there are two questions I want guidance on. One is like whenever Jupyter kernel executes some things and passes data on the display underscore data WebSocket message. I saw that in JupyterLab or anywhere else, you are seamlessly displaying the outputs, but I was not able to find the code of like how it is done because I wanted to mimic that in a Next.js based setup. So that was the first question. The second question is like I wanted to develop a fully in browser similar to JupyterLab. JupyterLab kernel using ZS kernel and Alimal, Plotly, and other packages support, but with my own custom UI built in Next.js. So what I thought was like I could embed your JupyterLab REPL in the iframe, and if possible, develop an extension which will intercept an event of core execution request, execute the code using the kernel in the JupyterLab, and send back an event to the host machine that, hey, here's the output. You can just set it the inner HTML value and just display to the user. So is that possible via extensions?
If I understand your second question, what you'd probably do is you'd probably write a lab extension that hooks into the current uh, current console, I guess, whatever the code executor is, and listens to its events. Like that thing has signals that fires when its kernel executes a command, executes some code, and from there you would probably do something like a custom event emission on your window object or something. And then from your parent frame, you'd be trying to listen to that. Or if that's, there's like, let's see, I don't know what your communication mechanism will be, but there's something like this. Basically, you'd write a lab extension, you'd put that inside your Jupyter Lite instance. That lab extension is listening to the current REPL, waiting for stuff to happen, and then it's doing something. I don't know how you'll communicate, but that's something I think you can figure out from there. But that's roughly, I think, the architecture of how you would do this.
Okay, so what I like via communication via window or post message, because the REPL will be within an iframe.
Yeah. So Mike has his hand up. Maybe he has a better idea.
Yeah.
So I think that there is already an example on JupyterLite how to have a console. So it's like not a full notebook, but more similar to a code console where you can give it some code and it will execute it, etc. And that's neat because you wouldn't need to load the entire JupyterLab application into your iframe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's right. Jupyter REPL, Jupyter Lite REPL. But the thing is, I don't want the code that will be passed to it will be AI generated, and the output I will show somewhere else. So that iframe I will just set display none. Like the iframe won't be visible to the user
Yeah,
at all.
that shouldn't be a problem. So on the JupyterLab develop extension in the documentation, there is a list of core plugins and extension points. So this is what I'm referring to. I think what you'd want to is to find the token which will allow you to listen to the signal on execution, and then you could find the output serialize either. So it depends what you want to transfer via
Oh,
the
example being
iframe.
interactive plot. So
Yeah.
what I tried is I embedded the Jupyter REPL in iframe. I found out that text field via class names and all. I set the text in an HTML to pass in the code. I simulated the shift enter event for it to execute the code. I got the output area tag, the inner HTML part, which has the class output area, the last execution, and clone the node to my main HTML body. But the issue is that the interactive property plot and other plots lose the interactiveness.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a very well defined problem. It's a problem which is not very easy to solve. It is possible because I solved this, and what I did was basically only take the output not as it is rendered, just the representation of the MIME bundle as it is returned by the kernel. So before it is rendered by the output area or render MIME package, transfer that over the iframe and replicate the rendering part using the output area package, which you can depend on in your other like main part. Now the HUD, like it will be very easy to render images, HTML, text, The hard part is this interactivity, because you will need to open connection to the kernel, and that's depending on the Jupyter widgets package as well. So it will not be easy. What I think is feasible and what I had some success with is developing, like, we have this concept of a front-end application, and Notebook is one application, JupyterLab is another application, like a very small application which only presents the output of the cell and possibly embedding that as an iframe. But
Yeah,
all of it is not simple. It requires quite some fiddling.
there was a note about that somewhere. So right now, if you drop into Lab, you can get a new view for an output. If we had a widget, a first-party main area widget that was get new view for cell, that if it was a markdown cell, gave you a side-by-side of markdown and rendered markdown. If it was a code cell, gave you side-by-side of code and all that. That would be great anyway in JupyterLab itself. If I want to focus on one exact thing and I don't want all the other garbage on the page, like you don't need a cell toolbar because it doesn't actually do anything for the cell you're in. The cell toolbar only manipulates its position within the rest of the notebook and stuff like that. And then on a light, we could just make that an app. Just that. And that would be amazing. So then that would make this case very straightforward, right? Like we would create the app. On the light side, we could say show the code or show the cell output or whatever, and it'd be good to go. But would also be great in lab. So that would really simplify this case down to, I mean, there's issues for it, but that would be the biggest enabler of this kind of thing. Show the toolbar, don't show the toolbar, just like a very customizable main area widget. Does main area widget have to have a toolbar? I think it does.
No, I don't think so.
Anyhow, but you'd be able to hide it, right?
But wait, is the cell model itself insufficient for this? Like, isn't that what you kind of really want in some circumstances? You just want an operational cell model that has control and does stuff, but there's no UI at all. Isn't that a thing you could do?
It's not going to work for widgets.
Hmm.
If you want widgets, you need a real cell, big boy cell.
Okay.
Because half the MIME types, they like, it's like the bad old jQuery days. Like that DOM element is the thing. We can fool it, but they want that DOM.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Okay, so the extension can access the kernel, right? And like, is there any method execute code or? Because I saw a session, I saw a kernel, but I was not able to replicate the iframe demo of changing the theme on the JupyterLab documentation because of some conda issues. But does the extension has any, like, the extension can access the Jupyter kernel and execute code, something like that? Is there something like that?
Yes, and
I can send you a link to the APIs, I think, for that.
like,
Okay.
if you are asking about the extension that you would need to develop to display the output with interactivity, so
Yeah.
Jupyter widgets / JupyterLab manager, that one is responsible for connecting to the kernel and exchanging this information via comms. And you wouldn't need to worry about that once you include this extension in your bundle. It would kind of happen magically. Now, the problem is that you need to load it. And if you are in like a React or Next.js situation where you don't have the JupyterLab machinery to load extensions, you need to do that kind of manually importing the plugin from Jupyter Widgets JupyterLab Manager package, and it has some dependencies. You need to activate these dependencies. So there is some information about that in the issue that I've linked, number 16227, because there is actually a standalone example of how to create a notebook without or even create a cell, a standalone cell, without the entire JupyterLab around it. And also sending the link. That's the examples/cell in the JupyterLab repository. But this cell will render outputs. It will not render interactive widgets. So basically extending on that example and adding activation of Jupyter Widgets, JupyterLab Manager, you could achieve that. It's unfortunately not trivial.
Okay, got it. To summarize, for the interactive part, JupyterLab Manager with the Jupyter widgets handles the interactiveness between the display and the kernel.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Nick might know how this comms happen. I think there is some information about how to open up the connection embedded in the output, if I recall correctly.
It gets real dirty. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like, you're gonna end up owning a lot of stuff. Is the challenge here? So that's why I would really love us to be able to offer on Lite just that single, very configurable cell application, but we can't build that effectively. We can't build and test that for all the possible ways that it could fail on Lite itself. Right?
Yeah, I understand.
So,
And the output rendering is by output area package, right? Output area and render mime.
but the first one, the basic
Yeah,
one,
the first one.
the
Yeah,
concept
because
rendering, but actual rendering is going to come from extensions.
okay, the actual rendering. So if I have a plotly plot, I need a render mime, I need output area package, I need the plotly extension.
Oh,
And that
plot.
is not available for Next.js or React. It is just simple JavaScript.
Yes.
I don't make any comments about Plotly.
Plotly or anything else, for example, alter plot or perspective widget or even the IPython widget like a slider.
Yeah. Every time you use just in these statements, there's a lot hidden behind those justs, right? So
Yeah.
most of these packages, in order to work at all in JupyterLab, have to do stuff with lab. And that's usually captured as tokens. Like, I need to go grab some config over here. I need some settings over there. I need a path from this place over there. But those are not always declared. And sometimes, I'm not saying who, certain packages inject things into the actual page HTML. They add things to specific places in the DOM, like they put attributes on the body and things like that. So it's very hard to reason about the general case of what's going to work. Typically, widgets are pretty good, are pretty well behaved. But if you look in your Plotlies, you look in your bouquets, you look in your panels, they're actually talking to the application itself. And you would have to fool those extensions into believing that you are JupyterLab for them to work properly. So,
Okay, I
Oh,
think I can be a bit more. I can say that it is possible to do that with Plotly, with Matplotlib, with Jupyter widgets, and with bokeh plugins, because that's as far as I was able to do that. Now, the difference is when user installs a JupyterLab extension for Plotly, Plotly tells, like, inputs a JavaScript file with the loading, and basically informs JupyterLab where to look for the plugin. And if you are doing that manually, you have to know the import path and import from lib from that npm package. But for those four that I mentioned, Plotly, Bokeh, Matplotlib, and Jupyter widgets, I verified that it is possible to embed them in a simple output without the notebook around it.
Okay, okay. Thanks everyone. I will go through the tons of resources and try breaking my head, but hopefully I will get something. Okay, thanks.
Is there anything else on the agenda?
I think that is it for the agenda. Does anybody have anything else before we turn off the recording?
Yeah, you know what? Just quickly, I will say this. We are holding the Jupyter Executive Council elections, and the deadline for nominations has been extended by a few days. I think it goes to this Sunday, is that right? So if you were thinking about it, now's your last chance. You should do it. It is a, I don't know, 4 to 7 hours, depending on how much you decide to do that week commitment for a week for 2 years. I'm not making it sound that appealing, but it's not that bad, and it's, you know, and now that Jupyter is part of the Linux Foundation, it actually is 2 roles in one. So it is a seat on the Jupyter Executive Council and a seat on the governing board of the Jupyter Foundation, which also involves the seats that are funders, right? So that's the body that brings in yearly subscriptions and is a large part of Jupyter's funding model. And so this election selects for people who join the EC who also end up joining the Jupyter Foundation. And I don't know, I think sometimes there are people who've been holding off and holding off and holding off, and with your screens turned off, I can't tell who's doing a tell, like a poker tell, where I would know who's actually been holding off. But in case somebody's doing a poker tell, that I would notice had you turned on your video cameras, you know, do consider it. You have a little while, and also the nomination form is like super like easy to do. It's 300 words. Like you don't have to think about it for a long time. That's my pitch. Oh wait, one last thing. I'm also running. I should tell you that. Like it's weird to like pitch something, but not to mention, I am also a candidate in this particular election.
Actually, I was going to submit a proposal for how to spend funds. Are y'all taking those? Are you looking for feedback?
Absolutely. Go to the EC's Team Compass and post an issue there. That's a great place to do it.
Okay.
We are working on, based on talking with the Software Steering Council and based on, you know, each coming from different parts of the project, we're working on a budget that is sort of provisional while we figure out how much money we've actually brought in. But we have some idea now because we've got a bunch of members who've signed up and, you know, actually completed and are in, right? So we have some idea, and so it sort of makes real like what the stuff in that priority queue, like which can actually be executed on. And like it's always really, really good if it's coming from the actual sub projects. Like that's like the best, right? Then we don't have to like invent how we think like from a distance. So please, yes.
All right, anybody have anything else?
I also had this kind of question around basically like I understand one of the idea of the Jupyter Foundation was that among other priorities to support the ongoing maintenance of Jupyter and some people have noted that there are packages around Jupyter, not necessarily in the purview of Jupyter Frontends, and that's Jupyter Frontends core, of course, that have been receiving very little to no maintenance recently. And I know that many people have been stepping up and try to help in their free time, but you know that can only go for so far and so long. I'm just curious to see how.
My suggestion as a member of the Jupyter Frontends Council, not as an EC member, is that what we do is, and this requires like 1 or 2 people to actually set aside some time, but somebody basically puts together a proposal and says, if we could have every month, half or a quarter of a full-time employee doing DevOps, that we could just file GitHub issues and assign those issues to this person who's being paid for it, that would help us guarantee that we're going to be okay. And we come up with some estimate, how many hours, that kind of thing. We go to the EC and say, this is what we think we need, right? And the EC then has a responsibility to figure out what to do. And what I would say with my EC hat on there would be, okay, we should probably pull out a call for contracts. There are people we know, right? And there are probably people we don't know who are capable, and like have someone bid for this contract, and like, we try it for 6 months and see if it's going okay. We try it for a year, whatever, right? But the trouble is, I don't think it's actually appropriate for the EC to try to solve this problem from on high, because the EC doesn't experience this problem. It sucks for the front ends team, right? So if the front ends team thinks that's gonna solve their problem, cool, but that might be like totally wrong. This is what I thought when I thought, how would I?
So the funny thing is, like the front end is one of the areas where I think the maintenance might be a little bit stretched and people might be fearing some burnout, as usually happens. But the projects where there is, or parts of the Jupyter project, sub-projects, where there is the worst maintenance crisis are those where there are no active members. So
Yes.
those will not bring forward.
No, you're right, but that's actually sort of, it obscures the fact that like between me and Zach and Jason and Brian and Fernando and Anna were members of almost all the things, even the not active ones. So like there needs to basically be a backstop that says, if you're a member of a non-active group that actually has a problem that needs to be resolved, and it's not just quiet, it's actually like inactive, then maybe it becomes that person on the EC's job. So for example, we're right now working on sort of reviving foundations and standards, because we now have the resources to make actual real life published international standards, but there needs to be people, right, who are working on the problem. So that's one we're looking to revive, but like there's almost certainly others for sure. I think we've spent a lot of time in the last few years talking about how we govern this project and who our fiscal sponsor is and all sorts of meta things. I hope that's not how this year goes, because a lot of those decisions have been made. And so now we do kind of have to shore up, I think, those aspects that feel like they're more threadbare than they used to be.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
And I think definitely like there's maybe some packages are are sort of abandoned, but I think just more broadly, there's a lot of things that nobody is really passionate about doing that aren't being done. There's a lot of docs that could be written both for users and for other developers and contributors. There's kind of, as you pointed out, like making the build system better and easier and more robust, making the CI better and easier, handle more stuff, be more robust.
mean,
And then
look-
things like, I think there's also things like community outreach too, right? So it's like having a person who can either do the logistics for running a community meeting or
Yeah.
reach out to users and or do support and things like that. There's a lot of needs for sure.
No, that's another thing. So a couple of things, and I know we only have a couple of minutes, but one is that we now have like 2 working groups that are somewhat the ones you would think of would run a monthly community call or something. Like there's like someone to point to and say, hey, okay, so who's thinking about this? But I don't know. I want to bring that up at the next DC call because I think now's the time we should revive that for sure. But as for like, the things that like no one has a passion for but like need to be done, like that's a prime like we used to have this model where we had to go to the different nonprofit sponsors and pitch something, some problem we're going to fix or some initiative, and like maybe they fund us for like 50K or something, and then maybe it happens, maybe like it was bigger than we thought or whatever, right? But now that we actually have an internal funding model, like instead that same docs working group comes to the EC and says, hey, look, we just like there's X amount of work, like we could just pay someone to do this work, right? Can we pay someone to do this work? And like it would be silly of us to say no to that request. So like if that's an outstanding need, cool. Like the trouble is though, it does put pressure on it's not zero work, right, to write that proposal. It's not zero work to then like write those issues. Like that's also work, but
Yeah.
like maybe it solves your problem and it's worth that sort of pain. Maybe it's
Right.
not much overhead the 4th time. I don't
Right.
know. I don't really feel like I don't want to just say it's actually your problem, go to town, but I kind of feel like in some ways creating a new sort of pattern of when you have a problem, maybe we can solve it if you come to us and say, all I need to solve it is X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I think this is all new. We haven't spent any like $1 of the money that's come in yet. So like this is formative, right?
Yeah.
Which again, last reminder, if you want to run for the EC, you can help form what happens next.
I think I'll be putting a proposal in probably soon.
This call is still being recorded as new people are coming in, or have we stopped recording?
We'll stop the recording now. We'll
Okay.
do a minute of offline stuff. Brace
Okay.
yourselves.